41 miles into the 127 yard sale, just outside Jamestown, Tennessee, Janice grabbed my arm and said, "Oh my gosh, Dale." We'd been on the road since early morning. Back roads, foam cups of sweet tea, 41 miles of roadside tents and junk you didn't know you needed. It was the kind of day that slows down on you in a good way. Then she spotted him. He was standing behind a folding table loaded with old fishing lures and cast iron skillets. Tall, fit for his age, wearing the kind of easy grin you see on men who haven't had to work too hard for anything. She introduced me. He shook my hand, held eye contact a beat too long, and said, "The millwright. She's mentioned you." Odd way to open. I filed it away. For the next 45 minutes, I wasn't there. Not in any way that counted. They talked like no time had passed, and I wandered down the row, found an old socket wrench set for $8, paid for it, walked back, and they were still going. At some point, Janice laughed. Really laughed, the kind that comes up from somewhere deep. I noticed I hadn't heard that sound in a while. I didn't make a scene. I just waited. That was 2 years ago. Here's what happened between that Saturday in Jamestown and last weekend, when I drove the 127 North for the first time in my life, with a woman in the passenger seat who actually wanted to be there. My name is Doug, 66 years old, 40 years as a millwright at a local machine shop. Gears, shafts, bearings. If it runs and it quits, I'm the one they call. I've never been much of a talker. I fix things, show up, keep moving. That's always felt like enough. Janice and I were married 31 years. She retired at 58 from the county assessor's office with a pension and no schedule to keep. I kept working because that's what I do. She had afternoons free. I had shifts. That quiet gap is where Dale came in, though I didn't understand how much it mattered until later. 11 summers straight, Janice and I ran the 127. If you've never heard of it, it's the world's longest yard sale. Roughly 700 miles, running from Michigan down through Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Georgia before crossing into Alabama. We'd take a long weekend, load the truck, and drive our usual stretch like we owned it. She hunted vintage glassware. I dug for old tools. We ate bad food, argued about directions, and fell into bed worn out. 11 years without missing one. Which is why that Saturday in Jamestown felt like any other day starting out. All I wanted was a good Stanley level and maybe some hand plane. Then she grabbed my arm. He stood behind that table grinning the way men grin when they've already decided how something will go. She made the introduction. He shook my hand. Firm grip, eye contact that lingered just past comfortable, and said it again. "The millwright. She's mentioned you." I let it go. I wasn't about to be the suspicious husband at a yard sale, but they talked for 45 minutes. I bought my socket set, came back, and they were still at it. That laugh again, deep, real, unguarded. Something shifted in my chest before I could put a name to it. A millwright learns to read small signals, a vibration that's slightly off, heat where there shouldn't be any, the kind of sound that means something's about to fail before it actually does. Standing there in Jamestown with my $8 socket set in a paper bag, I could feel the rattle. The drive home was quiet in a way that meant something. Janice had her phone out more than usual. I kept my eyes on the road and didn't say anything. Over the weeks that followed, small changes started stacking up. She joined a gym. New clothes appeared. On weekday afternoons, she'd drive to Cookville, said she was visiting her friend Linda. Said it's smooth and easy, the way people do when they've repeated it enough that it stops feeling like a lie. The moment that cut through everything came on a Thursday evening. She walked in, sat down, and said something I'd never heard from her in 31 years. "Doug, I just feel like I've been living small." I set my coffee mug down and repeated it back to her. She said she'd spent 30 years shaping her life around my schedule, my shift, my overtime, and she needed to figure out who she was now. What I felt wasn't anger. It was colder than that, because I recognized those exact words, not from our kitchen, from a yard sale in Jamestown, Tennessee, where a man named Dale had apparently been workshopping that speech long before she ever delivered it. I called my brother-in-law Ray, a retired sheriff's deputy. I told him what I'd seen. He didn't need many details. He just asked if I wanted him to make some calls, and I said yes. 10 days later, I had a name, a Cookville address, and enough documentation to stop second-guessing myself. Dale wasn't just an old classmate. He was divorced, semi-retired, and by more than one account, he ran this same approach regularly. Women in transition, women with steady retirement income, and husbands still on shift. Janice fit that profile exactly. I sat with that information for 2 weeks, up at 5 while she slept in. Dinners where we talked about nothing. I watched our marriage the way you watch a machine with a cracked bearing. Still running, still functional, but you can hear it and you already know how it ends. I found a family law attorney in Cookville, someone outside our town specifically so I wouldn't cross paths with Janice at the grocery. Tennessee runs on fault-based divorce law. Adultery is a recognized ground for dissolution, and documented fault changes how assets get divided and how alimony gets calculated. Her Thursday afternoons in Cookville weren't just personal. They had real dollar amounts attached to them. I kept my routine at home. What Janice didn't know was that I'd already started separating our joint accounts into protected individuals, all within my legal rights during the consultation period. I'd also cataloged every significant marital asset: the house, my union pension, my retirement saving, her county pension, the truck, and the savings bonds sitting in the fireproof box in the hallway closet. I wasn't after revenge. I just wasn't going to walk out of this with nothing. The conversation came on a Tuesday in October. She sat me down at the kitchen table, told me she didn't love me anymore, and said she wanted a divorce. I didn't flinch, didn't plead. I said, "All right," and watched surprise move across her face. She'd been expecting a fight I had no intention of giving. Then I said, "My attorney will reach out to yours by Friday." The room went very quiet. That's when she understood I'd already been moving. 40 years of shifts, 40 years of showing up on time, working overtime, coming home with grease under my nails and bills paid, my union pension, my retirement savings, 31 years of marital assets built mostly on my paychecks. Filing on fault grounds in Tennessee with documentation to back it up changes what that conversation looks like when attorneys are involved. We settled, the house stayed with me, the retirement accounts split, though not evenly, and the evidence Ray pulled together did exactly what it needed to do when Janice's attorney tried to push back. By November, Janice had moved to Cookville to be near Dale. By February, 6 months after that yard sale in Jamestown, she told my sister things weren't working out. I didn't return her call. Men like Dale are good at the beginning. They carry charm, borrowed lines, and the suggestion of a bigger life waiting somewhere down the road. But that's the whole package. Once the novelty burns off and it's just Tuesday nights and dishes in the sink, their interest goes with it. He didn't want Janice. He wanted the version of her standing at a folding table looking for a way out. Once she got out, there was nothing left for him to offer. This next part I almost cut from the story. After the divorce was final, I went back to the 127. For 11 years, Janice and I had run the same stretch, central Tennessee down into Georgia and Alabama, skipping the northern end because she didn't like the longer drive and had no interest in Michigan. That first summer alone, I drove north instead, up through Kentucky into Ohio, all the way toward the Michigan end. No particular plan, just nobody telling me which way to point the truck. About 3 hours in, just outside Hillsdale, Michigan, I pulled over at a long row of tables set up along a county road. Old farm tools, canning jars, a rusted toolbox that turned out to hold a nearly complete set of snap-on sockets inside. The woman running the table had silver hair pulled back and grease on her forearm from rehanging a sign that kept falling over. She glanced up and said, "You look like a man who knows what he's looking." I told her I was a millwright. She said her late husband had been a machinist and asked what I needed. Her name was Carol. We stood at that table for an hour and a half, and she didn't talk about self-discovery or use borrowed phrases to explain her life. She talked about the farm she'd been running alone since her husband passed, her daughter living 2 counties away, and 16 years of doing the 127 without ever heading south. I told her I'd never gone north until that day. She nodded and said, "Funny how that worked. The snap-on sockets ran me $22. Before I left, I wrote my number on a receipt and handed it to her. Felt strange doing that at 66 on the side of a county road in Michigan, but I did it anyway." Carol called 3 days later. That was 18 months ago. She's 63, steady in a way I'd forgotten was possible. Present, not rest, not working to convince herself of something. She knows who she is. A woman who ran a farm alone for 4 years, raised a good daughter, and never once made me feel like our time together was something she needed to escape. We're planning the 2026 127 together, both directions this time north and south. She wants to start in Michigan. I want to finish in Tennessee. So we're flipping a coin the morning we leave and letting that decide it. Carol laughed and said, "What if we just drive both ways every year and never stop?" I told her that sounded just about right. Some mornings I drive past the house I shared with Janice, and I feel the weight of 31 years in my chest, heavy and specific, the way old grief gets when it stops being sharp and just becomes part of how you carry yourself. I don't pretend it isn't there, but I'm not carrying it the same way anymore. I'm still a millwright, still up at 5. I still listen for the sounds that tell me when something's about to go wrong. And now I also know what it sounds like when everything's running the way it's supposed to.